Hey guys, welcome back to the studio. Sadly, it is November 26th. I did try to get 3 videos posted. I got one. But unfortunately, between the series finale of Supernatural, of which I mourn with my SPN family, thank you to Jensen and Jared for a phenomenal 15 years and some wonderful storytelling from Eric Kripke and all the writers at SPN. Thank you. It did take me a bit to get over that, and I had to take a couple days and just digest all that. But I'm back in the saddle, and sadly it's Thanksgiving. And, well, I came up with a wonderful set of notes and a wonderful dialogue of things to go over, my topic of which was my November fundamental, was composition. And unfortunately, composition is not anything, while it is fundamental, it is not anything to be lightly unpacked. So we're going to break this down and probably get a little bit into it next month too, because there is a lot to unpack when we're talking about composition. So if you are having trouble with maybe expanding anything into maybe just a bust, or getting your composition to balance, or if you have a weak understanding of what is involved in composition, we're going to kind of go over composition today. So composition, unlike your subject, those things are 2 separate things. You can have a cat is your subject, but that is not the whole of your composition. The composition is everything that is involved in your piece. So if you do a bust of a cat, and the cat is on a black background, how you pose the cat and the forms and the lines of action that your subject, if it is a cat, or if it's a dog, or if it's a horse, the lines that the subject takes make up your composition along with the background. Okay, so it's more than just your subject or your focal point. It's more than your foreground, your background, your tonal values, your storytelling. It's all of these elements put together. It's your leading lines, your the context, it's the environment, it's all the side items, and how you place them through your artwork, and things that you choose to do within your artwork to make your composition stronger or weaker. Oh, today's episode is going to be the first installment on the fundamentals of composition, so stick around. So for my subject of composition for this first episode, we're going to go over rhinos, which are very boxy, heavy, tanky animals, and can be very blocky when you're talking about putting them into a piece, because they can be an anchor or they can be a huge distraction. Now I'm going to point out the peacock that is behind the rear of this rhino, because it's going to be the fulcrum by which you get all of the good shots. Now when you're talking about the shapes that you make when you're putting rhinos in your composition, think rectangles and squares. Big, heavy, bulky rectangles. Your quadrupeds, for the most part, are all going to be rectangles when you shoot them from the side. So the problem with rhinos lies in that head. It's the fact that you want to make the focus the eye, and the eyes are very small when you're talking about the bulk of a rhino, and that because of the nature of the horns always lead up and away, and that can generally take the focus of the subject right off the page. Let's bring it into just the head. So if we bring it into just the head, we're looking at more of a square composition if you're doing maybe a bust or a headshot. So let's draw a square around this head. Now there is such a thing as a diagonal balance where you can draw a line from one corner to the other and then bring it down on a 90-degree angle, and that would bring your focal point too. Now in this in particular one, the eye comes right on that 1/3 line where we're talking about using a 1/3 balance. And then following the action lines from the back of the neck down through the face and up through the nose, you still have a pretty balanced composition, even with the potentially distracting elements of like the ears and the nose and the horns, or the horns on the nose. You're still going to wind up with a pretty strong composition here. I think if you were using this as your shot, I would definitely encourage you to maybe blur out the background and maybe even make it quite a bit darker so that you have a lot of pop and contrast between your foreground and your background, as far as your foreground being your rhino and the background being these rocks, because you're cropping that image down so much. Now it was spring when this happened. I had literally just walked out of a house and did not have my camera on the tripod yet, so forgive me for losing the shot. So we got a slightly different pose here. So now this rhino is now coming toward us. It's almost a 3/4 angle, but at the same time you've got a 3/4 headshot. So this changes the balance of your composition on your subject here. It gives a little bit less bulk to the body of the rhino, and it puts the horn right into the forehead. So we're going to go reinforce that square, or that rectangle once again, okay? And then we're going to just remind you that your focus is way down on this head over here, just on that square. So you got that anchor, well, your body mass is huge. The anchor is down on the face. This time your line of action comes right down the body and stops right in the face, okay? And this time your horns don't go off the screen, so they are not a distracting thing. And so your crosshairs wind up being in the two things that are really, really huge focal points, being the eyes and the horns. I guess even the ears at this point would become stop points, so that would be another thing that you could bring up. So all of the minor elements to this animal and your subject are all in the same area. This rhino's not done with this peacock yet. So as he comes up the hill, he's going to engage that peacock once again. That peacock's now like, oh shit, I'm going to get out of here. But we've got a stronger representation of everything that's going on. You've got a distinct foreground and background, and because your subject and your secondary subject are more engaged, now you have more lines of interest where there's a direct relation between what the rhino's doing and what the peacock's doing and what is going on. This is much more storytelling in the making. The rhino is at a higher perspective, and so because of this, it puts less distance between the secondary subject and the primary subject. It does put more distance between you and the subject as the viewer. However, there's more engagement between your primary subject and your secondary subject. Your rhino is also more compact, although you lost as much with the horns not leading off into other elements of the page. With rhinos, that's particularly hard. But in this case, we're kind of still in luck because the horn leads right into the ear and it kind of revolves right back into the body. but the line of action with the rhino leads right into the peacock, and so you can substitute that peacock for another creature. Understand that the peacock is just like this element that's at a zoo. You can sub that thing out for something smaller, maybe a jackal, something more native to where a rhino would be, so it would be kind of a little bit more natural. That really quick shot is really important because that little bit of a turn completely changes the composition. Your rhino is more compact. Your shape now changes on that rhino from a rectangle to a square. It also engages the viewer directly. So instead of it being kind of a passive thing where the rhino is looking off at something, now the rhino's looking at the viewer, even though we know from the context that the rhino is engaging with the peacock. Now again, you can actually change that peacock out for another subject. Again, maybe a jackal or a hyena, maybe a lion. It really kind of amuses me with the things you could kind of do when, rather than doing still shots, you could actually substitute the video out as something of more you could do with the shots that you have. Again, the rhino has the high ground, peacock's taking it low, but it's very much in the way of, oh shit, I gotta get out of here. If you wanted to do a secondary breakdown, you could definitely square up the head as the second focal point, but if you had to break this down into two, it would definitely be your focus from the rhino's head into the peacock's expression. That's where your lines of action stay, and that is where your eye line stays. So it's definitely between the rhino and the peacock. Your eye does not have any temptation really to get off page. Now we're back to that kind of passive look from this rhino where it's kind of like, eh, okay, you're a peacock. I'm gonna go do rhino things. He's a little frustrated. Now, our very wound-up rhino in the spring of 2018 decided to go play with this barrel that its keepers gave it. And again, sorry about the shaky camera, but here we have Derpy Rhino, okay, and a really strong composition here. It's square, and as much as before, the rhino's horn was a huge obstacle to leading the viewer's eye off the page or leading it into basically Never Never Land, into whatever else is going on in the scene. In this one, your eye winds up hitting two things, and that's the face of the rhino rather than the horn on the rhino, and the front leg on that rhino. I mean, look at that thing. It's out, it's in focus, it's dynamic. And who can say that a whole lot about rhinos? I mean, they're very tanky, they're very square. So when you're looking at the composition, just being the rhino, your eye goes to two things. It goes to the eye of the rhino because there's a lot of contrast, and it goes to that leg because it's an action line outward. You really don't see the horn because you've now lost, because of depth of field, you've lost the detail in that horn. And if I was going to repaint that, I wouldn't put it back in. So now, because you have the line of action that goes from the back of the body and through the head and following the leg, you could easily put a lion like dodging out of the way and make that way more menacing and less doopy and derpy than, you know, just this rhino playing with a barrel. And that way you have so much more in inspiration and ideas and options for what you can do with this piece, rather than just derpy rhino. Well, the other thing I want to say about this particular shot is because it's at the eye level of the person, as though the person were on the same level as the rhino, it makes the rhino square up. This isn't quite the really long rectangular thing. It's going to rebalance the composition and how much space it takes. So let's go back to derpy rhino playing with derpy barrel. It's already crushed. The peacock's still there, just kind of chilling in the background, but we're kind of done with it. We're just gonna crush the barrel and be like, I'm a rhino, I do rhino things. Peacock's like, you're a douche. Yeah, well, I'm gonna do rhino things. See me? See? I bet you can't do this. I'm gonna push it. I know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna straighten out my camera angle, that's what I'm gonna do. Gonna crush it, because I can't crush you. And then I'm gonna throw my head around, because derpy, stupid peacock should crush you. Yeah, your butt's big. Yeah, well, next time I see you, I'm gonna do this to you. I'm gonna pick you up with my face, and I'm gonna swing you around, and I'm gonna be like, how do you like my butt now? Derpy, stupid peacock. You're a derpy, stupid rhino. Swing you round by your hole. How do you like that, huh? It's my new dance move. Ha ha ha. Swing you around by your hole. Oops, I dropped you. Don't get mad at me. It wasn't a real peacock. This is why I'm on the endangered species list. Stop laughing at me. Stupid peacock. Derpy, stupid peacock on my face. I got a derpy, stupid peacock on my face. I throw a barrel at you, you stupid. Get out of my enclosure. Derpy, stupid peacock. Derpy, stupid rhino. Yeah, go find a girl. You too. I am a girl. Go find somebody of your own species. I love my barrel. I'm just gonna lay on it and hug it and hold it and call it George. I love you, Barrel. I didn't mean the evil things that I said. You still love me, right, Barrel? Barrel! Barrel! I haven't seen you all week. You've been not talking to me all week.